would actually be able to do it. Oh, and we're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Kill Your Darlings First Book Club. I'm Veronica Sullivan, Kill Your Darlings online editor, and I'm very excited tonight to be talking with Ellen van Neerven about her book Heat and Light. The First Book Club is a monthly series of in-conversation events which celebrate the work of debut authors in Australia. And in the lead up to each First Book Club, we also post reviews, extracts, and additional content related to each book club book on our website. And in fact, Ellen wrote a really beautiful piece about the process of writing Heat and Light, which we posted on the Killings blog a few weeks ago, and I would recommend you check out after this event if you haven't already. And we also had a short story from Heat and Light called The Falls, which was excerpted on the blog, and if you haven't read the book yet, I'd encourage you to check that out as well, and you'll get a really nice taste of Ellen's writing. We do generally meet in person, but tonight we're very grateful to the Digital Writers Festival for enabling us to host an online book club. I'd encourage anyone watching, feel free to tweet us during the event. You can ask Ellen questions or respond to our conversation using the hashtag DWF15. So thank you, Ellen, so much for joining us from Brisbane tonight for the First Book Club. I'll be talking with Ellen about Heat and Light, which is an amazing book of stories told in 3 sections, some of which are linked. It won the David Unaipon Award in the 2013 Queensland Literary Awards and has also just been longlisted for the 2015 Stella Prize. If you missed it, we had a Stella Prize DWF event on Monday night with beautiful live readings from many of the longlisted authors, including Ellen. So I would like to ask Ellen to get us started tonight by reading, again, a short section from Heat and Light.
Thanks, Veronica. Hello, everybody. I'm going to read a short piece in Heat and Light called Paddles, Not Oars. Keeler sat up cross-legged at his bed as his mother slept. He took his sock off to swish a cocky against the wall. He put his head out of the window, riding the cold air, and checked the flag was still positioned well. For his 13th birthday, his mother had got him a bag of marshmallows and a second-hand encyclopedia set, A to E. That month, he got a weekend job on the construction site, a block away from their flat, for the new overpass. One afternoon, he headed down by the pier and used marshmallows as bait. Thought he'd bring something home for dinner. He rubbed the dry mud off his cheek as he waited. His father had taught him to read the stars. Hours must have passed before his mother screamed at him from the beach, flat from walking the blocks, still in her cannery outfit. From now on, I'll get Fred to pick you up. A couple of weeks went by before they got the knock on the door saying they were tearing down the building, and they had 3 weeks to find another place. 3 weeks came, and Keeler's mother packed up the car, and they got on the highway. Keeler tried to talk to his mother. He watched her grip on the steering wheel. "We're going to your aunt's," his mother said. Keeler's body clenched the southward they got. He could already feel his legs growing cold in his board shorts. With nothing left to do, he read from the encyclopedia until it grew dark outside. They stopped at Coffs that night. His mother parked next to the caravan park by the water. Keeler watched the waves skate in. He thought about his father. He saw the canoe in the sky. His mother sat in the back next to him, a blanket over both of them. She told him stories of his father, talking herself to sleep. She'd always sleep before him, and he played his usual night games with himself, counting numbers, remembering the encyclopedia entries, albedo, bendo volcano, CIA, and repeating things his father had told him. There were so many stories that his father had never got to finish, and here the sky was different. He hadn't gotten through the organizational structure of the CIA when the lights of a vehicle approached. He crawled over the seats and parked himself in the front, pulling his mother's pillow out from underneath him. He didn't need it. He turned the ignition. His father wanted to teach him on his grandmother's property. "When Mum's not around," he'd said. She was always around. The wheel felt heavier than he expected. He reversed back onto the road and drove in the opposite direction to the car, which was pulling in. The car would be coppers or men involved with his father. They were going after him now. He pulled his hair up with sweat. He glanced back at his mother, and she looked changed, even in sleep. The star was heavy in his vision. Back at the old flat, he had listened in on his mother and their neighbour Fran from his bed. That's how they raise their boys. Fran said. I'm not going to let him get out of control. He's still a boy. 13. He would have been initiated if his father was still with us. There's got to be some control. Keeler steadied his head, put his foot down. The road bent with the bay. He could not see if the car was behind him. He hasn't struck you, has he? Fran's hushed voice. He takes my wallet when he doesn't want me to leave the house. He moved everyone's things out of the garage into the neighbours upstairs because it was going to flash flood. Is that my computer that's repeating those
I think
sounds?
it might be mine. I think it's mine, sorry.
That's okay, I just didn't know whether it was mine. He takes my wallet when he doesn't want me to leave the house. He moved everybody's things out of the garage one day into the neighbours upstairs because it was going to flash flood. Did it? A pause. Yes, you remember that crazy storm? The worst we had. Our street always cops it, low-lying area. Keeler drove faster. He was ready. He went roughly around a corner. He heard his mother stir. He thought about looking at her again, but he couldn't lose his focus. He's a big boy, Fred had said. He doesn't look 13. He's gone through too much, his mother said, and I'm losing him. The car was not unlike his bed in the old flat. He was steering them towards the star, towards his father.
Thank you, Ellen. That was beautiful. I was wondering if you could maybe start us off by giving a little description of heat and light in your own words, because I find it quite hard to describe to people when I'm talking about it, except to say it's really beautiful, read it. But it's quite an unusual structure and content, and I was wondering how you must have been asked many times now to talk about it, how you've come to describe that.
It's a little bit odd, isn't it? Yeah. I would say I talk about the book as being in 3 distinct parts. The first part is about a family legacy. It's told from different perspectives in one family, younger characters, older characters. And it starts off with a character called Amy, who's discovering that her grandmother is not the woman she thought she was. Her grandmother Pearl is quite mysterious, and she's really left this legacy on the family, and really is affecting the way that the other characters think about their own lives. The second section is a novella. It's set in the near future, and it's about, Australia has become a republic. We have a president called President Sparkle, and she has made these significant reforms to Indigenous policies that have had a quite devastating effect, and are not really what was in the best interest, and she didn't ask anybody whether this would be a good idea. I actually wrote it to try to be quite funny. So the new national anthem is Jessica Mauboy's "Gotcha," which is a really catchy song, but I don't think anyone could say why this has been chosen as our new national anthem. In the spirit of reconciliation, she's doing these things that are just a little bit, really off actually. And one of the things she's doing is creating a super island. So just off the Brisbane coast, this super island has been created by joining the islands that are already in the Moreton Bay. And this is where she thinks Aboriginal people should live. So of course it has these it's kind of alluding to things that have happened in the past where, a lot of Aboriginal people were removed and put on islands. But this is happening as, she thinks it is in that kind of step of giving us what we want. And then these creatures kind of emerge from the ocean, and that's one of the mysteries of the story. What are these creatures? Are they real? Where do they come from? What can they tell us about this new future? And then the third section is unlinked short stories that are really about identity, place. They feature a lot of young characters, like the piece that I just read before, and also the piece that falls on the website. Characters that are just starting out, just trying to find their way in the world, but they're already up against it. So yeah, it's really 3 stories in one.
And they're all so different from each other as well. There's like so much going on. But one thing I noticed that kind of recurred a lot was how strong the sense of place was in all 3 sections and in many of the stories. And it's not necessarily that the locations are in themselves things that would be considered remarkable by a lot of other people. It's often small towns and roads and spaces between and kind of marginal places. But the descriptions of the landscapes and the way that the characters interact and connect with them are really powerful. And I wanted to ask you about how much you consider place when you write and how place impacts on the stories that, as you're writing them as well.
Yeah, of course, place is a huge thing for me, as it is with a lot of writers, I think. And for me, like, place holds so much story, and it's almost unescapable, the power that place has to kind of hold you and make you realize certain truths. And so in a lot of my stories, the place isn't specific or named, but I do have a good sense of where I'm telling this story. And then in other places, place is named. Like I think I mentioned Brisbane a lot. Like I think someone was telling me I could like win an award of how many like Brisbane suburbs are named in my book, and like suburbs
Tourism award.
that perhaps have not been, nobody really has mentioned before, like Toombul and Barden, and yeah, some of those suburbs that I just kind of encounter in day-to-day life that I wanted to represent through the fiction, and wanted to also talk about the recent Queensland floods as well and the impact it's had on Queensland. So there's a story that's set a bit north of Brisbane and Rockhampton.
It is, as I sort of touched on, a hard book to categorise. And we do have a literary culture which really loves to label things neatly and be able to safely say this is this and this is this. But as you kind of described just then and when you were talking about the book, there are elements of all different things. There are elements of mythology and kind of speculative fiction, but then very much grounded in real characters and real, like, really close experiences and often very Australian settings. Do you find those categories useful, or do you think about them in relation to your work in terms of genre and that kind of thing, or do you kind of think it's beside the point?
Veronica, I'm just so grateful that people will read it with all different interpretations of the work. Some people read it as a novel, some people read it as a short story, and just a lot of people say that they love how crazy it is, and they love how that it is difficult to categorize, and that you almost have to create a new language in the way that you describe it. So I'm kind of really happy about that. Like I did think when I was like towards getting this published and working with my editor, I did have like moments of anxiety where I wondered if it just wouldn't fit in a box neatly enough. You know, like it wasn't a novel. It definitely was a novel. Though it can be read as a novel, it for me it didn't fit cleanly into that kind of bracket. But it also, you know, it also was really loose as a short story collection because these characters are just continuing on. You know, I couldn't almost stop. Particularly the first section, these characters just kept wanting to add and become this sort of saga. And I really, first section is kind of my attempt to really tell a family story from all perspectives, because so often stories are just told from one perspective, and we all know with our families, everybody has a different like point of view of like what happened at Christmas. You know, did he fall out of the tree or did his cousin push him? And so I just wanted to I thought make it really interesting if it was told from different perspectives. But of course, yeah, if you allow that into your fiction, if you allow that to be that inclusive, it just kind of, yeah, it keeps growing. And so it was almost like I had to stop heat and light from growing too much.
I mean, I think that the Kresinger section is really remarkable in that way because each character who tells each successive story, they feel trustworthy and you fully believe everything that they're saying, but then of course it jumps around in time and perspectives and you realize that they've all got their own truths, but none of them, they don't match up neatly, or you know, there are overlaps and there are points of disagreement. I think that's a really interesting experience as a reader to kind of find yourself believing and not believing all of them simultaneously. And also props to UQP for being really, you know, having the guts to publish it and obviously believing in something that's a bit unusual. I think that's a really, really great choice on their behalf, obviously, and it's paying off, but it's really special and often, yeah, I'm really happy with small publishers who take those risks because it's really great. It's really exciting.
Yeah.
Going back to the genre thing just for a moment, obviously that kind of the speculative elements are particularly noticeable in the middle section, which, as you described, is a kind of alternate near future and has a lot of political reparations for the mistreatment of Indigenous people, which become horribly misguided and result in an attempt to create a new artificial country. And then this race of human-like sand plants or tree people who arise, who are connected with the ocean and the islands where this new country is being created. And I do think it's very funny. I think all the President Sparkle stuff can be read as a really deep political satire, but it also has elements of like environmental warning and just also a really gripping, almost a thriller element for the main character who's doing this kind of almost spy-like espionage stuff by the end. And I think that is a particularly remarkable section, and it's completely unusual. And yeah, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about how you came to that story, whether it was kind of whether those political elements feel like a strong thread for you, but also just about that section in general.
Yeah, thanks for your kind words. So where did the I guess those political ideas come from? So yeah, I mean, I go to a lot of writers' festivals. I also go to a lot of art gallery openings, talks of artists, just across the kind of scale of arts, so visual arts, dance, theatre. I often go to attend those sort of events where sometimes well-meaning kind of outsiders can make kind of claims or questions about about Indigenous artists and why we choose to do what we do, and sometimes can assume ideas about what we might want. And I remember going to an artist talk at Goma, and there was a woman who she said, I'm an optimist. I believe Aboriginal people will one day get what they lost and more. And for me, that was a couple of us sniggering in the audience. And I hope this woman doesn't mind that there is, maybe that line is almost quoted in this section. But this is the President Tanya Sparkle who embodies this line. And for the idea of getting more than we lost, to me is quite a misguided statement, and it's just something that I wanted to play with. The idea of what's next for Aboriginal Australia, what future kind of violations can happen. Once you think you've gone through it all, what in this future of internet appropriation, of environmental vandalization, I recently saw that WA have kind of abolished the idea of a cultural sacred site. So what else is going to happen, and that's kind of just how that kind of expanded.
The way that it kind of betrayals and really nasty stuff keeps happening, even though there's all these overtures towards reparation, and it's like there's two different directions happening simultaneously.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, of course we should be happy that we have our faces on television, and and a lot of things are less, a lot of things are less prominent in terms of wage equality, but there's still so many issues like health, like incarceration, that are just completely under the radar. But we have our own TV.
And those concerns come through in the other stories as well, like in terms of the majority of the characters are Aboriginal, and there's a lot of discussion of this person's in jail for this reason, or there's a constant reminder that these things are still present in people's lives, and they become not normalized, but they become more familiar because it's not, and you don't kind of let that go away. No. And I think by slipping it in as well, it's like it's a surprise that then becomes, well, that shouldn't be a surprise necessarily. It's like you can't forget.
Yeah, these are just everyday realities, and I hope to tackle some of these issues with humor, because humor is also a coping mechanism for everybody, really. Yeah.
This is kind of on topic. We have a question from someone on Twitter who's asked how you handle the complexity you set out to create, rein in the beast, so to speak.
Sorry?
There's a question from Twitter about how you handle the complexity, so maybe dealing with all those different ideas and saying a lot with a story that still can be very readable. How do you rein in that beast that could threaten to become a story that has too much or tries to do too much?
Yeah, well, I think it's okay to try to do too much, but it is that question when you go back and look at a piece and do go, is it where's that line? And so I'm a kind of a big fan of the idea of shorter pieces, allowing that shorter word length to create something that has a lot of momentum and a lot of, particularly the novella, which is kind of in between short story and the novel, to really kind of capture the best of both, the short and the longer work. And yeah, so that's why I think, you know, the couple of my friends, when I was writing this novella, they said, "Oh, is it going to be a novel?" And I said, "I'm not sure if it has the legs to be a novel, but I know that it's going to keep growing, and I'm going to have to contain it." And so um, sometimes it's about choosing the form for the story, and just feeling confident that that is gonna work.
Mm. Um, I wonder if we can. You mentioned like speaking with your friends, the kind of pre-publication, and I was wondering if we could speak a little bit about the publishing process as you've experienced it, and kind of your writing career up to the point of publication. So I was wondering when you first started writing seriously, and what the role of storytelling has been for you.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I kind of have like a big family on both sides. So my my dad's family are Dutch, and my mum's family are Yugambeh from from southern Queensland, northern New South Wales. Um, and yeah, lots of born storytellers in my family, and even on my Dutch side, I will often hear these stories that just blow me away. But I really came to writing through reading, and it was through my mum being a library tech, and she would on school holidays, me and my brother would often sit in the library where she worked and just read. And yeah, I got kind of, that's always how it's happened. Kind of the new waves of reading I do just inspire me to start telling my own stories. So as a kid, I read fantasy. As a teenager, I was reading a lot of political poetry, like Annie Lisa Blair and Uncle Samuel Wagon Watson. And now I read quite broadly. Uh, I was reading a lot of spec fic before I started writing Hidden Light, and I was also reading writers like Junot Diaz and Louise Erdrich, which are two of my faves. And so uh, for me, to tell a story, you first kind of need to know who you are and how you're writing this story. And that started to happen when I was in order to have like really great friends of a lot of people well, which was really cool. And I started a job, which I'm still in, where I was trained as an editor, and I was working with other Indigenous writers, and yeah, learning to be an editor, then becoming an editor, and then working with these writers. And I was really kind of leaving writing, like writing was always coming last. Um, and I just remember having like a drink with my friend Chrissy Neen, who's a bookseller and a fantastic writer as well. Um, and she kept getting me to like do some reading events at Avid Reader. So go up and read my stuff for 5 minutes just before like a visiting writer came up, and so she was kind of like getting a feel of my stuff, and she said, yeah, got to keep going with it. And I said, oh, Chrissy, like I think maybe other young writers I've talked to feel the same, that you don't really feel that pressure of time. You feel like you can maybe do it a bit later. And I said, but maybe I'll just, focus on the editing right now. I really want to be, really want to put 100% into my work, and that's okay for me now. And she said, yeah. She said, oh, that's okay. So it's really satisfying you then. And I said, yeah, it is. And she said, and then she kind of looked at me again, and I said, yeah, okay, maybe I'll look at that manuscript again. And I started putting together some short stories that made up Heat and Light.
And having that experience with having someone maybe a bit more experienced and a bit who's had some success with writing themselves, having like guidance from Chrissy and from other figures, have you then seen that that's really useful and kind of turned that around for the editors that you're working with in the black and white editing program?
Yeah, I feel really lucky because I kind of have this sort of this kind of big world of like writers that I've worked with, editors I've worked with, um, and writers that I know, and I have admired their work for years, and that are now friends. And for me, that gives me strength in both my writing and my editing practice. And yeah, this year I am training other editors as well as mentoring writers as well. So yeah, kind of passing it down, I guess. Yeah, doing my part, and yeah, it feels really good.
It's really lovely. How was it then going through the editing process for your book and having your own editorial experiences on the other side? Did you find that was helpful to kind of be able to have both perspectives, or how was your editing experience, I guess, overall?
Well, it was Chrissy who told me. She said, editors are the worst at being edited, and she thought I'd be really terrible, and I thought I'd be really terrible. And I'd worked with editors on like shorter pieces before, and for journals and magazines, and I thought that went well, and I always enjoyed the process. And editors are always going to bring out something different that you might not realize about your own writing, and they always work in different styles as well. And so there's this really heavy sense of anticipation before you meet an editor or get the edits. And I just said, please just don't be terrible, Ellen. And then I met my editor, and she was really amazing to work with. First we talked for about an hour about the tennis. I think the Australian Open was on. So already off to a great start, and she just basically said, "Why are you worrying about this book? It's fine." She gave me
what you want to hear.
Yeah, I mean that's not all she said, but that she was making me feel strong enough for the work so I could approach the edit in that way, and not feel like it was a complete mess. So I'll never forget that, just how quiet and calm she was about the whole thing, where I was really quite freaking out. Yeah.
Were there any major changes that you had to make, or any significant rewrites, or anything like stylistic or plot, like from the initial drafts that you kind of brought to UQP?
Yeah, there was a couple of stories that dropped out that we just didn't think was strong enough. There was one, I was more wanting to go gung-ho and cut a lot of things, and Judith did tell me that some should remain. She definitely gave me some help with the novella, which was, as you said, kind of turns into a bit of a thriller at the end. So she was like giving me like some advice about guns and that sort of stuff that I really had just kind of made up from watching a lot of bad movies, and so she was helping me with. She understood that you could kind of suspend reality for a lot of the story, but where logic really needed to be, implored, she did like hold me up on one, the timing, like I think there's a clock that's ticking and it wasn't consistent in the draft, and also how this character gets out of there with what she needs, and the weapons that are involved. Judith was great with that.
That's really great. And then when you ended up doing the kind of 3 sections, did that feel like a natural way to group them? And as I said earlier, it's very unusual in terms of structure to have that kind of setup. But did it feel like that kind of fell into place in a way that made sense for the book as a whole?
I should say that that was Judith's idea. So before I met Judith, the stories, they weren't in those 3 parts. But it was the same order as it falls in now. But she just said, "There's 3 parts," and I said, "Yes, there is," and now I feel so much better about it. And so yeah, we. Then she said, "Well, what are we going to name the parts?" And I said, "Well, there's going to be a heat and light." And then she said, "Well, what about the piece in the middle?" And I had this, I had like I was kind of doing a Scott Fitzgerald moment where he went through like 30 titles to eventually get to The Great Gatsby, which his editor Maxwell Perkins kind of picked up from the pile. I had these really long titles. One was, maybe like a Paul McCarthy title that had already been used, and Judith just said, "It's water," and I said, "Of course it's water." So that really, for me brought the elements into play and really, made me feel like that it was a book, and we were getting there.
We have another question from Twitter, which is from Beck Kavanagh, and she asked whether you think you'll go back to many of the characters because there are so many wonderful voices that she wants to hear again.
I am definitely going back. I'm still working on those Cressingers. They're still coming back and forth. But I hope that they're not going to leave me. Nothing set in the works yet, but there is more writing about the Cressinger family and also more writing about some of the other characters that appear in the later stories.
Is that kind of what you're working on next, or do you have like a major project that's kind of your next goal, or are you just still working on the publicity campaign trail for Heat and Light?
Yeah, second book, you feel like it has to be good. I'm working on quite a few projects at the moment, probably because I'm feeling that pressure. But I did receive a Queensland Writers Fellowship this year to write a book that's about Aboriginal relationships with megafauna. So it goes back in the past and traces this country pre-settlement and talks about these ongoing stories of these creatures that once rode this country, and also is really talking about the present as well. We facing such a kind of dire kind of extinction prospects for the animals in this country, but also us as humans. I'm definitely making a statement about today as well, and I wanted to do it through fiction because there's a lot of non-fiction books out there already.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, like giant wombats and kangaroos, and really
that sounds so good. I also wanted to ask you, this is a little bit off topic from what we were just talking about, but about multiple identities and kind of the way that a lot of your characters and narrators kind of have all these multiple roles coming through in terms of like culture and sexuality and family and community and the way that those elements shape them. And there are sort of bits and pieces that recur, but each story really makes those new again and emphasizes the complexity and the multifaceted nature of people. And I just wanted to ask if you thought consciously about the kind of complexity of people, and then how you go about conveying something that is got so many layers to it.
Yeah, for me, I'm just writing characters I know, like a lot of the people I know, particularly Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. We have a lot of labels or a lot of but also a lot of responsibilities, but a lot of things that we're proud about. And I hope that kind of this pride comes out of the book, that these are not burdens. We're not burdened by family, we're not burdened by sexualities, we're not burdened by race or gender or age. You really things to be celebrated, and difference in people is quite extraordinary.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got another question as well, and this is from Anna Forsyth, who wanted to know whether you're a fan of Nick Lowe, who has a book called Arms Race, which I think is through Text and came out last year. And Anna said that she thinks that you guys have the best visions of future Australia in your stories, and she's fangirling.
I think Nick Lowe's great. I think we're going to have to team up and do something quite amazing. I met him in Melbourne last year, and I think he's said that he's got kind of a writing spot pad that's quite tucked away, remote. So, I guess if it would be a good place to hide and crack a crazy plan. So, thanks for bringing Nick's book into this conversation, because, he's a fantastic writer.
Yeah, and also
what a year for short story collections it was last year.
Absolutely. Are there, kind of on the topic of other writers, you mentioned a few of the writers that you read a lot when you were writing at different points in different parts of Heat and Light. Are there any authors that you kind of look to and can see have influenced your work directly, or that you feel kind of a lineage or some sort of connection between your work and theirs?
Yeah, I love Louise Erdrich. She's one of my favorite writers, and I also love Annie Proulx. Whether there's direct kind of influence or connection, I'm not sure. I think other people are better judges of that. But I do try and read as many different voices and as many different styles and genres as I can. So I don't become this kind of because you're going to become this watered down imitation if you do try and kind of strive for those fantastic writers' work. I also really love David Vann. I've been rereading him at the moment. I'm very excited for his new book. I'm a big poetry fan as well. The work of Lisa Blair really kind of just made me feel like I could write about young Aboriginal women in the way that I've written about, without completely alienating my audience.
I'd like to kind of go back again to your pre-publication, pre-Heat and Light experiences, and you kind of this is something you wrote a little about in the piece that you wrote for the Kill Your Darlings site, but I think it's kind of amazing. I wanted to ask you about the McSweeney's, how that came about, your piece in McSweeney's.
Yeah, like just one day, just finished uni, despite our lecturers telling us that we should submit to different journals, they even were helpful enough to give us names of journals and literary magazines to submit to. I never did that because I didn't really feel like I'd written a story that I was really proud of. I hadn't really found, what they said, your voice and what you wanted to write about. But a couple of months later, after uni was finishing, I just saw this advertisement for Indigenous writers to submit to McSweeney's through a fellow called Chris Flynn, who kind of came up with the mad idea and got it over the board with Jordan Bass, who works at McSweeney's. And so, I had this story. I worked on it. It was really kind of came out of a uni assignment, but with kind of added confidence, I made it a little bit more lively, and I sent it off, and Chris called me a couple of months later, and he said, I really like your story. I don't know where you come from. I feel like you've come out of nowhere. And he said, it's not certain. You still have to get it through the McSweeney's mob as well. But that was enough for me. Yeah, to actually kind of be noticed, felt really amazing. Then, yeah, sure enough, the issue was created. The other writers they chose were Tara June Winch, Tony Birch, and Melissa Lukashenko, which is total dream team for me. I was loved all three of their writing forever, and yeah, we got to kind of the issue came out in the States, and then a couple of months later it came out in Australia, and Jordan Bass came over and we did a couple of publicity events, and yeah, it was really quite it really quite felt like a huge moment for me, and yeah, McSweeney's is totally cool, yeah, as I, it's kind of my one hipster moment, so I'm happy about that, yeah.
And like, just to be clear, the first piece you ever submitted for publication was accepted by McSweeney's, which
Yeah,
I think
it was,
I don't know how many people could say that. It's a pretty good thing to like just drop into conversation occasionally.
Yeah. And published the best of McSweeney's as well.
Which is pretty incredible also. And so that opportunities came out of that for you, didn't they? Like, in terms of being kind of swept up in the McSweeney's event cycle, and they're like, people, obviously a big readership, but also people just being aware of your work and being, these three really well-established older writers, and then this relatively unknown name. It kind of makes you go, well, who's this person that I haven't heard about before? Did you see that then tangibly lead to other opportunities?
Yeah, people's ears definitely pricked up, and yeah, I had people talking to me, and it was all really great. And I think it's just what I try to tell younger readers, that younger writers, that you just have to like try and put yourself out there, and yeah, whether it's reading at an event, yeah, and every little kind of step gives you more confidence. It did feel like a huge leap for me from being kind of really shy and not showing anyone my work, to suddenly be out there and having people really interested, which I just couldn't imagine, and having a review and Publishers Weekly and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's kind of it was really good, and I was lucky that the next because I had a lot of people asking me if I had a manuscript, and I didn't have a manuscript then, but it was kind of good for me to have a year in between that, to make me really think about what I wanted to write, and for it to be a little bit quiet again, and then for them to have another opportunity, for my book to be out, and it's great.
Beautiful. I think we might wrap up soon. I think we might leave it there. Thank you to everybody who's watched. Pardon?
Can I say something?
Yeah,
where do you guys usually do your book club events? I'm trying to.
Do you want me to speak it? I can do that. Well, actually, we're about to announce a new partnership with Readings. So from next month, we will be hosting the Killy Darlings First Book Club at Readings Carlton on the last Thursday of every month. And
awesome.
we're in the process of finalising the authors, but next month will be Erin Goff, and it will be for her YA book, The Flywheel, which won Hardy Grant's Ampersand project, and it's a really fantastic kind of older YA book about like discovering sexuality and coming of age. So if you're in Melbourne, everybody should definitely come to that, and if not, fly in. It's very, very exciting event.
That sounds good. That sounds tempting. I might fly in for that one.
Well, I'm just really glad that we got this one together, because I asked you, Ellen, at the end of last year if you would do one for us, and I knew you were going to be in Melbourne, and it was very, very madcap timing and didn't quite work out. So it's really exciting to be able to do it through the magical internet. It's all worked out very nicely.
Thanks for choosing me as the experiment around as well. It's good, yeah, it's really good. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, look, as I've said so many times, I think Heat and Light is just a beautiful, beautiful book, and I can't encourage people strongly enough to read it. And it's hard to explain and it's hard to describe, but you just want to kind of give it to people and force them to read. So thank you for writing it.
Oh, totally blushing. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for watching tonight, and we hope you enjoyed the Kill Your Darlings first book club with Alan van Neerven. Thanks and goodbye.
Thanks everybody. Thanks for your questions.
Yes, thank you for your questions.
Yeah.